Perfect. Perfect. So I'm handing over to you, and you can just introduce the topic and take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Hira. Hello, everyone. Faiza Yousuf from Women in Tech PK and Code Girls here. We'll be talking about workplace safety today, and the reason that I picked up this topic because a lot of people, when they are job hunting, they look for a lot of things, but workplace safety or psychological safety at workplace is something that usually miss out from the initial conversations at the workplace. We have invited some amazing panelists who are leading organizations with excellent, work cultures, and we'll have a discussion about workplace safety, both in terms of physical and mostly psychological safety, and how they have built a culture that is, a very good playground for innovation and excellent team alignment. So in our panel today, we have Zeeshan Aftab. Zeeshan is a co-founder and managing director of Temples. Then we have Jehan. She is the president of Pasha and founder at the Nest IO. We have Bilal Mehmood, who is the managing director at Contour Software, and then Rabia Wafa Khan, CFO at Engro Powergen Kadarpur plant. Yeah. So we have all of you here. Thank you so much for joining in. I know it's a Saturday. मुझे थोड़ा सा बिलाल साहब ने कहा भी था कि सैटरडे वाले दिन आपने पैनल रखा है बट थैंक यू सो मच फॉर जॉइनिंग इन मैं आई वांटेड टू टॉक अबाउट व्हाई इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट why it is an important discussion right now is because we are kind of talking to a lot of people who are looking for jobs, and we want to equip them with the knowledge that when they are looking for an organization, what kind of things that they can look for in finding a culture that fits with their personality and their aspirations for their career. um, Before that, of course, I also wanted to define a bit of the topic. So, workplace safety is again about both the physical and psychological safety of the people who are working in your organization. And while physical safety is comparatively easier to ensure because we have standards for that, but psychological safety is a tricky and less discussed topic. And of course, it is very difficult to measure the kind of culture that you have in your organization. And when we define psychological safety, it is about being able to show and employ oneself without the fear of negative consequences of self-image, status, or career. So your team can express their ideas and be very candid with you and authentic with you while they're working in your organization, and they're not scared about being themselves, and they do not have to take a political route to get things done in the organization. um, yeah, so that's about it. That was my part. I'll start with a question. So the first question is for Jehara, but before you answer your question, initially I would really like you to kind of take 2 or 3 minutes and talk about yourself and tell people more about why you said yes to this panel and why do you think it's important for you as well. So, Jehan, the first question is that, of course, your organization is one of the most happening places in Karachi with so many startups coming and going. So, is there any way that you or your team kind of ensure that the place stays sane and safe for whoever is coming in?
So thank you, Faiza. You want me to introduce myself before I answer the question? Okay. So I'm Jahara. I've been part of the IT sector in Pakistan since the mid-90s. So that tells you how old I am. And I really didn't want to let you know how old I was because, having a baby face makes people wonder how old you are until they actually find out the number of years that you've been in business. But, it's always been important to me because from the first day since I joined Pasha and the IT industry, I noted that the number of women were minimal. So I was the only woman who was part of Pasha discussions in the early years. And although the numbers have increased, they are still not satisfactory. And I feel that limits the growth of the IT industry, the diversity of what we're able to do as an industry. And also, of course, I mean, if 50% of your potential workforce is not available to you, then I think there's something totally wrong. And there are so many talented women that we see all around us who should have that opportunity to be part of a sector that is growing and could grow even more if women were a part of it. And when people talk about the IT sector, they don't understand it's not just programmers. Although we have a lot of talented women programmers, but there's user experience, there's project management, there is design, there is so much that is part of the IT sector that people don't understand. That's what makes the industry what it is. So I think not having women as part of it is just something that is not acceptable. And that's why I've been so passionate about talking about it. And that's why I felt that being a part of this panel was very important. About the Nest IO, we started this 10 years ago, 6 years ago, sorry. And I think the reason it is considered a safe place by everybody, this includes people I hire. So out of my 10-member team, 9 of them are women. And I didn't go out to look for just women. I looked for the most qualified people that were needed in the nest to make sure that we were able to do what we do. And they just happened to be women. And I want to make sure that people understand that, because this is not activism on my part. This is, let's go look for the right people and make sure they're given the right jobs, because they're not. As you know, as a standard rule, people don't want to employ women and they have many excuses for it. I think that is changing, and I think some of the panelists, Zeeshan and Bilal, have shown that this is changing and how they have benefited from it, and I hope they will share that. How we make sure that it is safe? When we hire, we make sure that our team understands that this place should be safe for women as well as men who come here, and especially because they are young. Many parents actually come in here to check out the space and talk to us before they send their children here. And I say children, but these people are in their, from 18 to 35 mostly. So, but they are children in the eyes of their parents. And especially women, I think their parents tend to be much more careful about where they allow their daughters to work. The leadership from the top is important. If you make sure that the startup founders who come here and the team that works here understands that there is no tolerance for anything that makes anyone feel unsafe or feel that they, feel awkward or feel, I don't know, anything that is not normal, then there's something wrong. And I think I have run this place for 6 years and have yet to see or hear of any complaints of anyone misbehaving, anyone making anyone feel as if they don't belong, anyone feeling awkward or not wanting to come in because they feel they're not safe. And I think that leadership from the top is extremely important, that no nonsense will be tolerated. I remember there was just that one instance where one of the male founders actually raised his voice at one of the team members who was a woman because he felt he was a man and he could. And I found out about it and I called him in and I said, this is totally unacceptable. If you cannot respect the women who work here or the women who are founders here, then you don't belong here. Then you know where the door is, get out. To his credit, I think nobody had told him that before. To his credit, he behaved perfectly after that. And there were no complaints about him for all the time that he was here. So I think that leadership from the top, sending a clear message, what is acceptable and what is not, is extremely important. Don't keep quiet about it. Don't think that if you're hiring someone or if you have someone in the space, that in order to keep them because they're talented, you have to put up with all sorts of nonsense. Doesn't work, in my opinion.
Right. Thank you so much, Jehan. Absolutely. It's extremely important to draw a line and, keep your boundaries clear. Otherwise, it will become really difficult to, manage a lot of people. Next question is for Zeeshan. So, Temples has a culture of being very welcoming to women. So, what policies do you have in place to ensure that the workplace is safe for them and, of course, everyone else?
Thank you, Faiza, for having me here. It's a very important topic, and I would like to sort of say a few words about ourselves before we move forward. So we started this company about 16 years ago, and we hired our first female employee when we had about 10 plus people, 10 or 12 people. We had a very small office, and we had only one female employee, and she spent about 10 plus years with us after that. So we were like fortunate to have our first female employee spend 10 years with us before she got married, and then she went abroad. Um, so the I think the problem of workplace safety and inclusion has to be settled, addressed in a not from policies perspective, but from a mindset perspective. So what we do is, like, we have a family oriented culture, and so we know when we bring in women, we feel like we're bringing in our sisters and daughters in the organizations, and that's how you sort of uh, inculcate the thing in people. um, we definitely have a zero tolerance policy. I mean, we've had instances where we've sort of um, you know taken strict actions against people. So that is, like, I would say 1% maybe, or maybe less than that. But overall, it's a culture that you create and promote within the company. It's the one of the most important thing is having people from the same gender at leadership positions. I mean, obviously, I am there, but a lot of things don't even reach out. I mean, reach up to me, because they are addressed at grassroots level. So you have to have the right kind of people who are listening, who are understanding. So look, if something happens with some female, she would be shy to go up and speak to a male about it. So you need to have women in leadership positions who understand the problem and who can address it themselves. So the best thing in our organization is, like, if firstly, we have a zero tolerance policy. If something happens, I get notified that this had happened, and this action has already been taken. So we've empowered female leaders in our organization to take actions for any such nonsense. That's how we sort of treat it.
Right. And on a follow up to that, are there any specific policies that are around this area, in the sense to ensure that the place is physically and psychologically safe, or anything that is specifically towards women?
Absolutely. So we make sure that if there is work left, these days everybody's working from home. But I am telling you stories about from 2019, when people used to stay back and spend late hours in office. So we had clear policy that any female staff staying back after 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. has to be given a company conveyance to their home. And these are like trusted contractors who've been hired to sort of do that. Similarly, any we would recommend people, female staff, to sort of leave early, and then reach home and then work from there as well. This has been happening in the past as well. um, Apart, we have policies for to encourage female staff. So everybody has a maternity leave, and then they can sort of come back and then select the schedule if they want to work on a part-time basis, or they don't want to take a lot of workload initially. They can select to be a part-time employee, or they can bring we have a daycare facility as well. They can bring their kids with maids, etc. So a lot of facilitation is there, and it's clear that everybody is clear in the company that there is a policy to help women pursue their careers. And we will do that at any cost. I mean, if it requires some sort of leverage given to them, we would do that.
Right. Thank you so much, Ishan. So, Bilal sir, coming to you, when we talk about safety policies in the workplace, what do you think are the bare minimum that should be there in an organization? So if, for example, someone is looking for joining a company, what kind of questions they need to ask about workplace safety from their prospect employer to get to know the company better, or policies that are there?
Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So Contours, just I'll give a little bit of a couple of minute introduction about Contour software. Contour software started about 10 and a half years ago. And we have evolved significantly. We've grown to about 950 staff. We have childcare facilities in all three of our offices, Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad. We have at the moment at least 16 women that I can count in team lead, manager, or associate director level. But 10 and a half years ago, I inherited a dozen people from an acquisition we completed, which basically started Contour's story. And they were all men. And we hired another 10 or so people before finally, we hired in our second year our first 3 women employees, one in a documentation role, one in a QA role, and finally my first HR hire when I could afford to hire an HR person. And one of the things I take great pride in is that of those first 3 women we hired, 2 of them are still with us today. One of them, she's not even in the same country anymore. She had to move to Saudi Arabia once she got married. And even we allowed her to continue to work remotely for us from there because of the subject matter expertise and quality of work she'd been doing. So, as far as the policies and procedures are concerned,
Has he stuck?
I think
Yes, I
so.
think so.
Yeah, can't
Because
hear him.
Okay, so let's move to the next question, and I think Hira will manage to bring him back. So next question is for you, Rabia.
matters into it.
Again, oh, Bilal Sahib is here. Okay, let's let him continue. Yeah, Ji
Sorry,
Bilal sir.
is there an audio issue?
No, you got stuck for a moment, but now we can hear you. Okay.
Okay, sorry. So having that documented is important, but what's more important, and we see the same thing with laws in Pakistan, the implementation and oversight of that implementation on an ongoing basis is a lot more important. So we happen to have the first HR hire was the best of the candidates interviewed, and she happened to be a woman. But when we started in Lahore and then we started in Islamabad, the top candidate was actually a man, and we were in early days and we couldn't really afford to hire 2, and instead we made sure to hire 2, so we'd have 1 woman and 1 man. And the reasoning is, it's you can't really truly empathize unless you've walked a mile in the person's shoes, and you can't, no matter how hard we try, if you don't have a woman in a management team to be the voice, bring the perspective, I think that's step 1. You have to have that to begin with. So having her in, and she's still with us. She leads the HR team today. Then another element is, of course, ensuring that everything from emergency evacuation to harassment, all those matters, there be something written in your handbook that deals with all those matters, and ensuring that on day 1 you spend a few hours on all these onboarding matters, especially related to safety, physical, psychological, and all those aspects. But you also have to take some steps, operational, strategic, in including people and making them feel that they're included. So our early days, a bunch of men, the most of our fun and games was around cricket. And there was a conscious effort to expand that, to make sure that we started to spend our social agenda on things that would include people, men, women, people that preferred other activities, to just make sure that we were addressing everyone's needs. And especially the majority is always going to be loud and vocal. They'll get what they're looking for, but you need to make sure to um, not just address everyone's needs, but try to get the quiet ones to tell you what their needs are, or anticipate and ensure to cover for it. um, and we actually had somebody in the company who took the lead on the social agenda, and he was quite popular at the time, and unfortunately had a habit of kind of putting women in a box and kind of dealing with it that way. And we had to tread carefully and kind of move our culture away from that. And it was a bit of a tough exercise, but over time we kind of came out on the other side. It's important to have a relatively flat hierarchy. We have something what we call a period in review. It used to be month in review, and until we got to about 200 people, I was meeting every single team on a monthly basis directly. And only once we reached about 200 people did I start to get some portfolio managers to take on that role. And the part of the reason for that is to build that one-on-one relationship, make people feel that yes, you can approach me at any time. Other than this one room's exception in one of our offices, there aren't solid walls. There's glass walls. If anybody makes a mistake of putting too much frosting, we remove it so that there's just enough. We don't want too much privacy. We want to be visible. We want, even if we close the door because we're being loud, we want to make sure that we're visible and, available. And, despite all of that, of course, you hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. So, even right from the beginning, we had door access systems, security cameras. Once we started to get a decent number of women, security guards, we started to add them for the different shifts. All those things you also have to do just to be safe. One other thing that we've done, I don't know whether most companies would do that or not, but we've always had a very strict policy against any religious or political discussion, because it never goes in a good direction. It starts to get personal, gets heated. Some people can find themselves feeling it's a hostile environment. So we've always had a documented, communicated culture that none of that. So these are some of the things that we've implemented over the years.
Right. And if someone is looking for an organization to join in, do you think are there any signs that they can get to know a bit more about the culture while they're being interviewed there?
So definitely, are there any women in the interview process? What do you see as part of the facilities within the organization? Are they catering to everybody? Are you seeing people being treated fairly? The two office helper boys from that acquisition that we completed in 2010, they're still with us today, and they're very dear to us. So is the company treating everybody, regardless of their position within the organization, as family, or are they not? Those are some of the things you can look for.
Right. Thank you so much. Rabia, moving to you. So Of course, I understand that your area is a little different from tech, but we really wanted to include you to get to know a bit more about the policies and practices at Engro. So, the question for you is, what policies and perks Engro specifically have to ensure a safe working environment? Again, because a lot of you work at the power plant and are away from your families and from your own city. So, how do they ensure to make sure that you all are feeling safe in that environment?
Assalamualaikum everyone. So yes, I do work at Engro, and I've realized that it's a corporate, and we have a lot of employees, a lot of sites. We have a mining operation at the Thar plant, and we have a power plant over there also. This I'm talking about only the Engro energy vertical. We also have a gas-fired plant at Qadirpur, which is closer to northern Sindh. And of course, cultures differ between urban and rural areas. And so what Engros are very clear about a couple of things. So everyone's expected, there is a bar in place, everyone is expected to be at that bar or higher. There is no such thing as, you're shouting at somebody or etc. etc. Very clear policies are already in place. So we have, as a foundation stone, we have a harassment policy. And it's not just for women, it's for everybody. A guy can also be harassed by his manager or whoever. So a harassment policy, very strong harassment policy is in place. We have constantly, we keep interviewing, and we keep training new investigators for that harassment policy. We have Speak Out, a very, very active Speak Out forum, which is centralized at Engro Corp, and anyone from an internee to a janitor to a vendor can post any harassment or any other complaint related to the Engro working on that Speak Out forum. Those are actually investigated in detail by a committee, and they are reported in the boards of the relevant company. So we take the process all the way to the end to show everybody that we're walking the talk. Primarily, we do this because, Faiza, as you're aware, we have a power plant, we have a mining operation. We can't afford to slip up. People work in shifts over there, they work in rotas, they're away from their families for 2 to 3 weeks. Currently, we have a few employees who are female who work in our mining operation. The power plant is largely run by Chinese operators, so we don't have much of we have a skeleton presence of the owners at the power plant. But regardless of that, we have had harassment complaints, and we have taken them to the end, including moving people out of the company or sending people home if harassment investigations are found to be correct. So there is a zero tolerance policy. I think Bilal talked about that. So, and that stems right from the top. The culture is there that this is not something we're willing to compromise on. In terms of regular sensitization, we realized earlier on in around, I think, 2010, that everybody needs a constant reminder of behavior practices. So we have a sensitization program in place. It runs every 3 years. There's a feedback loop. It's mandatory for anyone coming in, especially in a position of authority where there are people reporting to you, but even otherwise. How do you treat people? How do you treat minorities? I know Bilal said that you don't allow any conversation of politics and religion because it doesn't end well, and that's very true. So what we are trying to teach our employees is, they have to be respectful of people's differences, different opinions, and including gender, including cultural sensitivities, because we have a lot of different cultural people. They're urban people, they're rural people, all sorts of people work at Engro at a plant site. So sensitization, I think, has been one of our biggest successes. And it's the one thing that we always come back to feedback loop. So whenever we have harassment cases, we have always looked at how we can make our sensitization program stronger to make sure that the message from the top of zero tolerance goes down all the way to the bottom, to the truck drivers, to the people who are operating your boilers, to the people who are running HR, to the people who are managing finance, everybody. And I think that has been the biggest feedback loop. The final thing, Faiza, that we've done, I think there's something we started last year, which is a because of COVID was um, psychological safety. What we started in April was more of an in-house counseling program where we have a counselor in place who can talk to people, uh, to our employees as needed, to guide them, to let them know they're not alone. And I think that has contributed well towards a more sane workplace culture. So you can't always change timelines because you have multiple people working and everybody is working very hard, they're putting in long hours. But I think you can try and manage sanity and you can try and manage behaviors to ensure that every employee who walks in your door feels safe working and 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 realizes that there is no option for, bad behavior.
Right. Thank you so much, Rabia. Moving to Jehan again. So, does the Nest IO keep an oversight on the employees of its incubatees? I know that total control is impossible, but just wanted to get to know that because these are startups and most of them do not have proper policies and HR professionals. So, how can they ensure a better work culture while they are being at the Nest IO and learn from your team?
So, Faiza, that's true. I mean, they're just learning how to start their businesses. So, learning about team and
Jehan
team.
is stuck, I guess.
No, I can hear her.
I can hear her.
Okay, okay.
Can you hear me now, Faiza? No, I don't think she can. Uh, anyway, I'll continue. The rest of you can hear me. So, the thing to do, yes, these are people who are starting companies for the first time. Sometimes they haven't even worked in any other company, so they don't know much about culture. They don't know about team formation, how to treat people. Some are coming from families where perhaps the culture is very different. So we make sure that when they become part of our family, when they become part of the Nest IO, the early sessions that we have here talk about team building, talk about culture. These are very important issues that they need to learn before they start forming companies and growing them. Because then it can, if that is not addressed in the early days, later on it can come to haunt them. So yes, first of all, we hold sessions where they are encouraged to talk about what they think, and then we talk about how different companies are addressing team building, how they're focusing on culture, and how important culture is when you're starting a company and growing it. That's one part of it. Secondly, most of my team sits outside with them. And so they see us engaging with each other, they see us engaging with them. And I think there's nothing better than learning from example. So we keep an eye on them, although this is not, this is not sort of a police state sort of organization where you keep an eye on everything that goes on. But yes, small things like even when they're using the cafeteria, many of them are not used to picking up after themselves or making sure that they keep the place clean, because that shows respect for the place that you're working in. So we make sure that they don't think that there are servants around, although there are office boys who do much of the work in the company, but still, they are encouraged to do stuff for themselves. And also, these things are pointed out gently but firmly. And if anyone is seen to be engaging with any of their team members in a way that is not acceptable, then they are called in and, this is pointed out. Now, when I say acceptable, it doesn't have to be harassment. It can be, look, you're in a public space. If two of you, whether it's a boy or a girl, are already in some sort of relationship and then you join the Nest and you're part of your own team, that personal relationship should not be, obvious in a space where there are other people, because they're not comfortable. Other people are not comfortable sort of seeing you holding hands and doing stuff like that. There have been a couple of instances where we have had to point this out to those teams that, look, we understand you may be engaged, you may even be married, but these kind of things should be kept outside of the workspace, because it's just not acceptable to be that obvious in your behavior in a space like this. When you talk about psychological safety, I think that is much more important, although physical safety certainly is. But sometimes you don't realize how you are affecting someone psychologically in the way you behave towards them, or if you're screaming at them, or if you're just making them feel awkward. And that can affect them long term a lot more than the physical part of the safety does. Because people can just get up and leave and say, well, I don't feel safe here. But if they've been affected psychologically, they take that with them wherever they go. So I think that is an emphasis that we make in our engagement with the startup founders, that when you, especially when they are mixed and diverse teams, that make sure that when you are so for instance, there was one instance where we were talking with a team from one startup, and there were girls and boys on that team, and every time one of the women spoke up, one of the male founders or one of the male members would sort of interrupt her and say something with much more confidence, making sure that that girl felt as if, what she said was not important. That too is harassment. I'm sorry. It's not acceptable. Her point of view is just as important as yours. And we make sure that we tell them that. So I stopped him and I said, I want to know what she has to say. And then, of course, you have your chance to tell me your viewpoint. So I think these are important engagements which, in the long term, help them become the professionals they become. Now, whether they carry on with their startup journey or they join a company like Contour or 10 Pearls, that education, informal education, helps them in being better professionals and better team members. So that is extremely important. And we engage with them to make sure that these kind of things are pointed out without, embarrassing them or without, making an example of them, so to speak, because they're not doing it because they're mean people. They're just doing it because that is what they know. That is how they behaved in university, or that's the way they behave at home. They may not have any females in the home other than the mother. They may have watched different generations of people behaving differently. There could be any reason. And our job is not just to make them startup founders and good team members, it's also to work on who they are as human beings.
Right. Thank you so much, Jehan. So the next question is for Zeeshan. Zeeshan, tech has this pace that is unmatched when it comes to, comparing different industries. Tech teams tend to burn out pretty quickly, and that burnout can, cause a very toxic environment. So how do you usually deal with a situation like this? Because an organization that delivers services has to be really fast paced. So if something like that happens in one of your teams, how would you pick that up?
Thank you. That's a very important question. And, again, one of our key core values is, employees are assets. And we make sure that, whatever happens, employees are, not at the receiving side of, the bad stuff. So what we've done is, we are one of those organizations who does not accept, unnecessary stuff from the customer. For example, if a customer would, call us on a 5 p.m. meeting that, this has to be done today and you have to spend the night today. We are not that company that would accept that easily. We would just tell them, there was a plan to do this task, these tasks in next sprint, or this was agreed already, so we are not going to do that. But there have been instances where people are required to work late hours, and so we make sure that the the person working on it, either male or female, is compensated for the extra hours, either in terms of an overtime or in terms of a day off next day or something, few hours off something. So that is there. Apart from that, we also have our own organization psychologists. So we see that this thing is coming up, so we hired professionals to handle that. So there are instances where people are going through a tough time in their lives, and they attribute everything to their job, whereas the job is not the culprit. There's something else happening in their lives. So we need to, and there were some clear instances for that. So we hired an organizing psychologist who would sort of, have an informal sessions with them, understand the problem, and then come back to us with probable options that we can support that person as well. In terms of, we are very clear with our staff that anything that is, if you have a female in your team and she is required to stay back, or she needs to work extra hours or something, there has to be a differential treatment, because it's pretty obvious. I mean, if you want to work in an organization, if you want your sister or your daughter to work in an organization, you need some equality there, right? And if the organization is not offering that, then there's a problem. So we make sure that there has to be some, females are treated in a much better way. If there's a requirement to stay back, they are compensated there, so there's options available. Um, and then the most important thing is coming back to the customer. I mean, not accepting anything that the customer says. In organizations, a lot of they say customer is always right. We don't accept that. We say customer may be wrong. You need to have the courage to tell the customer that and yes, in this instance, you're not right. So that is sort of we call that a pushing back the envelope, and we make sure that everything happening is just and fair. One more thing that I noticed that the Jehan also mentioned that she's been coaching the people to have standard behavior, etc. The graduates from last 2 3 years or 4 years, I would say, they are in much better in when it comes to voicing out the concerns, behaving in a much better way, not accepting any sort of harassment, etc. Whereas people from who graduated 10 years ago, so they were like mostly sort of okay with the kind of behavior, which that this is very good. I mean, I see young girls, very upfront, not accepting anything below par, as Rabia mentioned. So that is a good thing. So things are very much on the better side, and things are improving, and we see the men are sort of understanding that they have to be inclusive as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Zishan. So, Bilal sahab, you run an organization that has nearly 1,000 people, a lot of people, a lot of locations, and of course, it can turn into it can kind of bring up a lot of cases when it comes to intimidation or some kind of bullying, or people getting political for their specific agendas. So, if something like that happens, and that is kind of also part of text toxic traits, that these kinds of things happen, so how would you deal with a situation like that?
So you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So, our interview process, we're a little bit notorious or known for it being longer than most companies. We have multiple steps other than, technical tests. The technical interviews are conducted by people who themselves served in those roles in teams. We have separate HR or non-technical interviews. And these interviews are being conducted by people that have spent a lot of time with me, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, because for, again, till we reached about 200 people, almost everyone who was being hired was having an interview with myself. So, that building that sort of sense of culture and expectations with your early core, for as long as it's humanly possible for you to be a part of the process with every single hire, that's something that we've done. And the other thing that we have is we have our 3 or 4 steps locally, but then we also have the benefit of that final validation interview being conducted by a manager from onshore, from in another country where the division office is located. And I do believe that bias is inherently local, whatever the country. So there's a chance or a potential of that being there. Somebody referred somebody because they're like-minded, and we feel that this step helps us to kind of have another filter for that. At the sort of the start of the funnel, what works for us, at least in the first 8 years, a little over half of all people who actually got hired came in via employer reference. So versus a personal reference, the employee reference is a lot more of a professional gauge about what you can expect in terms of their work as well as their behavior. Again, we make it clear that everyone is important. The the girl sitting at the front desk, she doesn't call me sir or anything like that. She calls me by my first name. So we do our best to have to do things that will permeate and be an example for everyone, to set that sort of flat hierarchy. But sometimes no matter what you do, people are going to be in their best behavior in the interview process, and despite all of your coaching, sometimes the only option for the good of the rest of the team is to part ways. But we do quite a few things. People, when they come in, our seniors are incentivized to share knowledge within the team and across the teams. We incentivize the success of the incoming people. The people that are already with the team are incentivized for the growth of the team. There are times when you'll notice that a group of people are sticking with each other, and then there's a small, maybe one or two people that are new, or the older lot has they're just busy, and they're not having an easy sort of mingling. So we put in place employee engagement and interaction activities. We have mixers. We plan them out to get people from even teams and departments that would otherwise not necessarily have any reason for interaction. And the purpose is to increase your network within the company, increase the number of people that you feel comfortable communicating with, can get mentorship from. And I think that's also worked well for us.
Right. So, Rabia, the next question is for you. You mentioned a bit about the speak up culture at your organization. Um, the situation that you guys deal with is comparatively more complex than tech, because again, rural and urban people from different cultures and rural and urban areas are working together. So, tell us a bit more about this platform, or how does it work, and if someone has a problem, what happens when they report it, and how the company can take steps to resolve that.
Okay, so our speak out culture is fairly old. We started it around 2008, 2009, and it's been an evolving process. We've tried multiple things. We've seen what works, what doesn't. We've gone back to make it better. We have an email address. We have a telephone number. The phone number we have stopped now. We're primarily on email now. And we have now empowered managers, mid-level managers and above across the subsidiaries that any speak out complaint can be made to individual harassment committees across the subsidiaries or the companies and forwarded to the speak out email address by employees, managers also. The way it works, Faiza, is you have a problem. You could be a guy, you could be a female. You could have a boss who's toxic, who you think is picking on you, who's not giving you the right opportunities. These things happen. Someone's not giving you opportunities. Like Jehan said, there is mansplaining happening. The younger lot is being put down because the older lot wants to get things done faster. All of these get reported to the Speak Out forum. There is a team which is assigned. An corporate audit looks at the Speak Out forum and handles all the complaints. A team is assigned 2 people, 3 people. For example, the agro energy vertical has a harassment committee. I'm part of that committee. Anglo Fertilizer has its own harassment committee, and queries are redirected to the individual committees because they're on ground and can handle them. And so, one, for example, harassment complaint that I had recently dealt with, it took a month and a half to resolve in COVID days, and we got to the end of it. Multiple, I think there must have been at least 12 to 15 interviews of a number of people. So we take it that seriously. We go down to the nth level of detail. There is a lot of reporting to the CEOs just to show and to walk the talk. I think what's most important in a successful speak out forum is that the CEOs and the top management have to be aligned. When they take the speak out complaint seriously, when they take that panel seriously, is when everyone takes it seriously. So while having a speak out complaint against you is not a kiss of death, so to speak, it is enough to raise eyebrows. So you also realize as an employee that something has to change, like Jehan said, in your behaviors, in the way you deal with people, something has to give. And that's how we deal with it. It's top down. Corp puts a lot of effort into making sure that it is known as a legitimate platform. Board members question about speak out complaints as needed. We clearly tell all of our boards, whether they're listed or they're the private companies, any speak out complaints, any whistleblower complaints that come in through the forum, and what the resolution of that complaint is. And I think that plays a huge role in the success. When people see the system working, is when you trust the system to work for you when you need it to.
Right. Thank you, Rabia. So again, we are dealing with a lot of people who are joining in, planning to join in the workforce, and of course, a lot of them are looking at your organizations as well. So, a last quick question for all of you is, if someone wants to join the organization, for example, if someone wants to join the Nest.io to get their startup incubated, or if someone wants to join 10 Pearls or Contour or even Engro, so, what kind of people do you think are successful and unsuccessful at your organizations? What kind of traits that are really valued in your organization, and what are the traits that you would rather not have? So, Jehan, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure, Faiza. So I think the traits that we look for are that they have an open mind, they are willing to learn, they have a gendered respect of people around them. Everything else can be taught, but they need to have a belief in what they're doing, and they need to have an open mind, so that if someone tells them that, look, or ask them, look, this is the startup that you have, but we think that this is the pivot you need, or ask them questions related to their startup, they should be able to explain it without getting offended, without holding it against whoever that person is. So I think that respect that you have, both for mentors and also for the people who are working alongside you, or the people who are working as part of the Nest.io team, that doesn't mean you agree with everything. That just means that you have an open mind to take in what is being said and then respond accordingly, but with respect. So I think for a successful person, whether it's a professional or whether it is a startup founder, you definitely need, the key thing is you need to have that respect for other people, and also you need to be able to learn from others, learn from everything that is around you, learn from resources that are available, because unless you are on that continual journey of learning, you are not going to get very far. Sticking to what you know is only going to take you to a very limited area of growth. So I think that to me is most important. Have an open mind, be open to learning, be open to feedback, and have respect for people.
Right. Thank you, Jehan. Zeeshan, would you like to go next?
Yes, so I think obviously we look for technical skills. The person has to have good technical skills. Apart from that, then communication is very, very important. We see a lot of people who are very good technically, but they are not able to express themselves, and that's why we are not able to take them on board. Um, and then the least one of the most important that Jahan mentioned, respect for people. and the person has to be a people's person. I mean, you have to be a good communicator, and then a good people. There are people who are very good technically, and they're independent performers. We would rather not take them, but we take an average sort of a technical person who is good with people, because most of our projects are done in teams. So if you're not a good team player and good communicator, then there's a problem. Obviously, the people who are not going to be successful are who aren't willing to learn. I mean, it's okay to have moderate technical skills, but if you have an open mind, if you're willing to learn, then that's the key. That's the most important part.
Right. Thank you, Zeeshan ji. Bilal sir.
So one key trait that we look for is people need to be self-driven. Even 10 years ago, we were offering people the work from home option. Women especially often would want to, if they're working for a Pacific Coast division and they want to go home by 5 or 6 and then continue and connect for their meetings from home after dinner. So there's a level of self-driven expectations that you have from an adult, and there's a little bit of a cultural problem in Canada or the US, or probably in the UK also. If you don't attend a single class in university, but you come and sit for the exam and you ace it, you go through. In Pakistan, if you didn't attend a certain number of classes and have attendance even in university, you're not even going to be allowed to sit for the exam. So you're not really being treated as an adult even in university. And when people come to the companies, some of them don't have that experience of having managed their own time, and that's a major cultural issue. And you have to interview for that. You have to hire for it. Of course, we're historically hired more senior experienced people, but that self-driven aspect, especially if you're going to avail the benefits we provide, then there's that level of trust that comes with it that'll make you successful. Track record of consistency is very important. Listening skills is critical that we interview for, and of course the good communication, teamwork, ongoing learning, all of these things are very critical for success at Contour.
Right. Ji, Rabia.
So more of the same. Obviously, baseline technical skills in whichever field those candidates are coming in goes without saying. They have to have it. Hard work and communication skills are also part of our baseline. It goes again. It's part of the package deal. But I think what we look for in Engro is a lot of we look for ambition and we look for drive. Like Jehan's, I think Zeeshan said, you can teach a lot of things, but the drive to pick up something and take it to conclusion, to look for new things. So we do big things. We've done the third dream. We've done the NWIN project. So for that, the DNA has to be people who are willing to take ownership of blue ocean ideas and drive it to conclusion. And that's what we look for above the baseline ingredients for a successful employee. So our culture has a lot of room for ambition and for drive. So that would be it.
Right. So that's all for today. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining in and talking about workplace safety. When I was picking this up, a lot of people were a bit skeptic because this is not something people expect in a job fair, but we really wanted to talk about these